And welcome, brothers, sisters, working class heroes. This is the Rick Smith Show. Thanks so much for being here today on the big program. Lots to get to, lots to talk about. More executive orders from President Joe Biden, this time on the climate change issue. And this sent the right wing just completely into a tizzy because what? We're not going to be able to drill in the last pristine land on the planet? What? We can't have the Arctic wildlife destroyed? What? We can't drill everywhere? No. And I can't, the Twitters were lit up with right wingers whining and complaining that there's going to be $7 a gallon gas and the economy's going to come screeching to a halt because, we're not going to let the drillers drill in the last pristine place on Earth. Kind of reminded me of that book I used to read the kids when they were little, The Lorax. There's some lessons in there. And, maybe we should all go back and read some kids' books. At some point, if you're running to the end of something, maybe consider not going all the way to the end. Maybe consider, going in a different direction. Now, what Joe Biden has done is he is asking government agencies to determine the extent of the drilling ban on these federal lands. Because remember, before Trump left, and thank goodness he left, he gave out a whole bunch of leases. I mean, dirt cheap. $25 an acre to drill, baby, drill. And of course, knowing, this was a setup, knowing that Biden would come in and undo this so that the right could go and have their tizzy and be all upset. It's not somewhere we've allowed to do before, and it certainly didn't bring any real substantial money into the coffers. It's kind of like giving free resources away. It's kind of like when a community brings in one of these bottling companies and goes, yeah, you can have all of our water, and then you can sell it to other people for a buck a pint. Yeah, you can do that. You'll pay pennies, and you'll get don't worry about it. And then you have communities who don't have any water left. Yeah, this is what this is kind of like. So he's laid out some ideas. He wants to conserve about 30% of our federal land and our water, because understand you can't live without water. He wants to do that in a short 9 years by 2030. Climate change, he is going to make this a national priority, which, we've been talking about this for a couple of decades now. Now in 2021 going, this is a national priority. Something we probably should have, done a while ago. Also going to create a task force to come up with an action plan to reduce greenhouse gas emissions. Also going to create multiple commissions to focus on environmental justice and green jobs. He said, look, these aren't pie in the sky schemes. These are concrete, actionable solutions. He said, today is Climate Day at the White House, which means that today is Jobs Day at the White House. And immediately Nancy Pelosi tweets out the same thing. Good paying green jobs are the pathway to creating equity and opportunity for America's working families, and an integral part of a comprehensive strategy to build back better as we address the climate change for the people, she says. Now, for me, I'm right there. Yes. We've been talking about these green jobs for a while. We've been talking about redoing our energy base. And the first people who should get these jobs should be the people who are affected on the pipelines. And you go, but you're just protecting those unions. Yes, I am. But we're also sending a huge message, a massive message that change is good. We want to encourage change. But the people who are going to be affected by that change are going to be taken care of. And we're going to move you into somewhere where you're not going to lose your entire existence. There's a lot of change coming in the near future. Technology is going to be taking over a lot of jobs. We're going to see tons of pressure on people to upgrade their skills, on wages falling. We've got to be doing a lot of things all at once. Because understand, it's been about 10 years already since we've been talking about the AI and the automation taking away, about half of all of our jobs. We should have been building and planning for this all along. Still, nobody doing it. In fact, in the last presidential race, the only person really who talked about it at any length was Andrew Yang. We got a lot of catching up to do. But for me, the idea that we use this transformation to make those first people who are harmed by it whole, and then we build from there. Look, there are going to be tons of jobs in this. But the message, the symbolism, I think is really important. Because guess what's happening right now? I must get 30 emails a day from different groups and organizations complaining, well, those 8,000 union pipe fitters, those 8,000 union pipeline workers, you just threw them under a bus. And they're going to do that to divide the hell out of us. And I'm saying the first thing that we should do, as we should have been doing all along, is we should have been making them whole. Whenever I talk about the trade deals, whenever we would pass a trade deal, and they always couched it in terms of these are going to be great job creators. They always put trade adjustment assistance in there. They always put that in there because they know that the transition, the frictional transition, is going to cause people to lose their jobs. And they give them a little bit of unemployment. They give them a little extra money for education. It's really minor. I'm saying this has got to be bold and robust. And it's got to be where people don't fall behind. So for me, the first thing that should happen, the first thing that Nancy Pelosi should come out with is those first jobs go to those pipeline workers. And then we move out from there. But all in all, I'm not unhappy with what we saw out of Joe Biden. But the reality is, if we're going to really address climate change, it's got to be done with legislation. That means Republicans are going to have to come around. Republicans are going to have to stand up and be statesmen. My fear is executive order is the best we're going to get. Because if the Republicans have shown us anything over the last 12 years or so, they have no spine to do anything that's in the better interest of our country. It's all about feeding the folks at the very top. And they've done a great job of it. Look, best democracy money can buy. We've got the best Congress money can buy. And look, I would argue on both sides of that. But we will see. Now you've got the new the old acting Secretary of Homeland Security. I guess he's the new acting secretary, David Pekoski, I guess. He has issued the National Terrorism Advisory System Bulletin, and it's what we already knew. Crazy people doing crazy stuff. It says the Department of Homeland Security believes it will persist in weeks following the successful presidential inauguration. This would be a heightened threat environment across the United States. We will be in a heightened threat across the country. And look, I think we know that. In fact, I'm waiting for March when everyone of my, QAnon Trump supporting friends still thinks that Donald Trump's going to emerge and there's going to be some kind of inauguration in March. I haven't heard it as much lately because Joe Biden is right now acting president and we haven't heard from Trump much. Thank goodness. But this is that weird thing. And, for me, I look at this and you go, the people who have stoked this stuff, Donald Trump, has to be held accountable. And the sad reality is you've got the Rand Pauls of the world, the Mitch McConnells of the world, who clearly are not going to hold him accountable. If yesterday's vote was any indication, Trump will not be convicted. And McConnell's going to let this play out, and he's drug it out, and he's kind of forced the hand. And the Democrats have kind of gone along with it. In that we're now going to get into the middle of February by the time this is done. Which means we're going to lose, close to a month of time where we should have been working on other stuff and focused on other stuff. And the media should have been focused on other stuff. Like this crazy woman, this Marjorie Taylor Greene, which another video surfaced today. Yesterday, we talked about the fact that she was supportive of executing prominent Democrats. in her Facebook comments and videos and things that she liked in 2018 and 2019. Today, the video of her harassing that David Hogg kid from Parkland, just berating this kid as he's walking down the street, and I guess proud of it because there was a video of it. While she's saying, I carry a gun, and here's this kid unarmed who's just been through a gun trauma with this crazy woman telling him, I've got a gun. That's exactly who we don't need in Congress. And, it's just this weird kind of moment that we live in this time. Today I was out. I was in the only place left probably in my entire area where you can go make photocopies. I needed some photocopy stuff done for us to send out. And, I got this thought in my head where you're going, whatever happened to people being nice to each other? Whatever happened to people, in moments that, of maybe discomfort or stress, of people deferring to being, just kind of calm and not lashing out? Whatever happened to that? How did we go from a society of, hey, do your own thing to, hey, I got to worry about what everybody else is doing, and I get to do whatever the hell I want? I mean, it was the weirdest day, because as I'm waiting for my copies to be done, I'm looking around at all of this conflict. I'm in this office supply store, and there's nothing but conflict around me. And oddly enough, and it's this weird moment where, I always used to believe that maybe when women are in charge, they're going to be a little bit better organized, they're going to be a little saner, a little less confrontational, more collaborative, all those things that we were raised to believe. Oh my gosh, no. The Karen Brigade must have been out in full. There must have been a Karen meeting at the Staples. There had to be. Because the woman who was in front of me was just apoplectic over the fact that she couldn't print off her email, and it was her fault. And she was yelling at the clerk, and she was yelling at the machine. Hell, she even yelled at me, and I was just standing there. And I'm watching this stuff, and I'm going, is there hope for us? I mean, you've got the Department of Homeland Security who's saying, oh yeah, there's going to be more. There's going to be more craziness. There's going to be more violence. There's going to be more uprisings. There's going to be more chaos. We know it's coming, and we knew it was coming. We've known this has been coming for a while. Back during the George W. Bush years, they were saying the rise of right-wing extremism is a problem, something we should be worrying about. And the Republicans are like, no. Those are our people. Shh, don't say anything. And then during the Obama term, they had the audacity to say it, and then it was a racial thing. It's the black guy going against the white people. And they skewered Janet Napolitano. And now, what was pretty much predicted happens, and more is going to happen. Because the stress level, the crazy level, is being ramped just way up. And I'm watching this stuff, and I keep coming back to when do we back up? And it kind of started thinking about this Marjorie Taylor Greene woman, and this moment where she's harassing this kid in a way that it was like she wanted that kid to get into a confrontation with her. She kept goading him and calling him names and all kinds of this is a grown woman. And it immediately I'm thinking about that George Zimmerman situation where he sees the black kid with the hoodie with the Skittles and and he starts harassing the kid till the kid finally pops him, and then they end up rolling around on the ground. The guy goes, "Oh, I'm in trouble," and shoots and kills the kid. And immediately my mind starts going to these places where now I'm trying to drive, and there are, two guys just walking for like 300 yards right down the middle of the road where you can't get around them. And, I immediately regretted it. I beeped the horn. I'm like, dude, how'd you get to be so old being dumb? And then immediately I start going, hold on. That's enough for me to get shot and killed in America. because he may have felt threatened. A guy yelled at him from the window for doing something stupid. Where back in the old days, someone would go, oh, yeah, hey, man, that was stupid. I shouldn't have done that. How do we roll this back? Is there a way? Because I look at someone like Joe Biden, and I had someone, email me and say, oh, he's a communist, he's a socialist, he's all these horrible things. And I'm going, Joe Biden has been probably throughout his career one of the most moderate senators we've ever had. How is it that in this world right now, everyone who is a Democrat now is the most socialist Democrat that there ever was? That can't possibly be. Just like I agree, not every Republican is a Trump supporter. They may have voted for him, but they're not rabid. Now here's the difference. The difference is we only had 5 Republicans who said that the impeachment should go forward for a guy who clearly incited a riot. There used to be a moment in this country, and maybe it's just that I'm getting a little bit older and I'm starting to go, things aren't quite what they used to be. There were moments when we held people accountable. There were moments where law and order mattered. And there were moments where we were decent to each other. I'm hoping those come back. I'm hoping in the next couple of months when things tap down a bit, when things get kind of back to normal, because I gotta think a lot of it is the pandemic. I gotta think a lot of it is people who are just they're just tired of being separated and tired of having to deal with all of the things, the school and being closed down and work and everything that life throws at them, and then to have to go through all this. I'm hoping that's a part of it. And I'm hoping when things open up that we then take that breath and we start being a little bit nicer to each other. I mean, it's really kind of crazy. And I'm hoping I can go get copies done without having to see and start looking around, looking for a place to duck, where if someone just starts shooting. Now you know why during the Wild West you'd go into some towns and they'd take everybody's gun and the sheriff was the only guy with it. But no, we can't have gun control because, well. Anyway, I'd love to hear your thoughts. You can email me, rick@thericksmithshow.com. I'm going to take a quick break. When we come back and talk with Dr. Allison Gill about the impeachment, the craziness going on, and much more. Stick around. You're listening to The Rick Smith Show.
Nothing more American than workers standing up, and the union gives a voice to win. On The Rick Smith Show.
I'm Rick Smith, and this is Labor History in 2. On this day in labor history, the year was 1908. That was the day the United States Supreme Court ruled that bans on yellow dog contracts were unconstitutional in the case of Adair versus United States. The case served to nullify the Erdman Act of 1898, which banned such contracts for those who worked on moving trains in the railroad industry. The Erdman Act had been a response to the 1894 Pullman strike. At the time, the federal government smashed workers striking against deep wage cuts and for union recognition with Eugene V. Debs's American Railway Union. Seeking to prevent any disruptions along the railroads, the Erdman Act banned any contracts that required workers to renounce unions in order to gain employment, recognize the right of union organizations as a means of collective bargaining, and established mechanisms for the arbitration of grievances. In 1906, William Adair, a supervisor with the Louisville and Nashville Railroad, fired a member of the Order of Locomotive Firemen for his membership. Adair was indicted under the Erdman Act, found guilty, and fined. He then appealed to the U.S. Supreme Court and won. The Supreme Court ruled that the Erdman Act violated the Due Process Clause of the Fifth Amendment and served to supersede the Commerce Clause in the Constitution. The court argued that the railroad's employment decisions were a protected right so long as they did not injure the public interest. Congress could not criminalize the firing of an employee because of union membership. Dissenting opinions centered on the potential for renewed labor conflict. Workers would have to wait almost 25 years for yellow dog contracts to be banned in all industries with the passage of the 1932 Norris-LaGuardia Act. Labor History in 2 brought to you by the Illinois Labor History Society and The Rick Smith Show. For more information, go to laborhistoryin2.com.
Welcome back to The Rick Smith Show. Now, here is Rick Smith.
So as I've been saying over the last several days, I'm really enjoying the whining and the, oh, they're victimizing me pleas of the people who are being arrested for being traitors, for, their seditious acts on January 6th. Today, the one that came out is a Colorado geophysicist. He's being accused of beating up a police officer. Now, his argument is, I wasn't beating him up. I was just patting him on the back. Yeah, with a nightstick. There's a video of this guy with the nightstick around a cop's throat, but he was just patting him on the back. Now, he did try and flee the country, bought an airline ticket to Zurich, but they caught him before he got away. So I can't wait to hear the defense in this. It's going to get better, trust me. I cannot wait, and I've been enjoying it as much as I possibly can. I'm here to share some thoughts of the craziness and how we turn things around. I've asked our good friend Dr. Allison Gill to come talk with us. Allison is the famous podcaster, one of my favorite podcasters on the planet. She's the Mueller, She Wrote person, The Daily Beans, and a new one with Andrew Torres called Cleanup on Aisle 45. Allison, thanks for taking time for us.
Hey, thanks for having me. How are you?
I am good. I love the new name for the new podcast, Cleanup on Aisle 45. There's a steaming pile.
Yeah, exactly. We really want to make sure that we're seeing what's going on in this new Biden Justice Department with Merrick Garland at the helm, provided he's confirmed by the Senate, which I assume he will be.
Now, I got to tell you, I just love the fact that these people are being arrested. My problem, though, and this is where, again, we do live in two different worlds. We're not seeing the kind of things like you see on Cops, where they kick in a door and they slam people to the ground. We're not seeing that. We're seeing very nice arrests like you used to see in the old days, where people put their hands in the car. Oh, will you please put your hand behind your back? We're not seeing, and I want to see that. I want to see these people slammed to the ground, knee in the back of their neck, arms twisted, because they deserve it.
Yeah, I would have liked to have seen that on the day they breached the Capitol, as a matter of fact. But we had some blockages at the top of the Army, Secretary of the Army, and over the Secretary of Defense, Christopher Miller, who was just recently installed, had been recently installed by Donald Trump, who didn't deploy the National Guard in a timely fashion, leaving those Capitol police officers to the mercy of these insurrectionists. But I do love seeing the arrests. I know that at very first, when they were starting to get arrested, everyone was a little upset that they were just being charged with like trespassing and violent entry. And I told everyone, don't worry, these are just the charges they used to get them up off the street and bring them in. There will be continuing charges and continuing investigations. And as we've now heard from the Department of Justice, they are moving to charge them with seditious conspiracy. And a lot of these folks are now facing 15, 20, 25, 30 years max, of course, max in prison. And all for what they thought was just what they're now saying was just a fun, I got caught up in the moment. We didn't mean any harm. We just brought a gallows with us.
Donald Trump told us to do it. I was just following orders.
Mm-hmm. Right. And I'm waiting for him to be arrested, although this particular Department of Justice has said that they aren't going to go after the inciters, including Rudy Giuliani, Donald Trump, and Donald Trump Jr. But that doesn't mean that the next Department of Justice, the one we're putting together right now, won't do it. And in fact, Merrick Garland brought up the insurrection in his brief 8-minute comments when he was nominated by Joe Biden on television, which indicates to me he's very serious about, wielding justice against the insurrectionists and the inciters, hopefully.
Yeah, I mean, this is something obviously that, as I said a moment ago, has been going on for a while. These right-wing extremists have been organizing and growing. In fact, they, as I said, during the Bush years, they were talking about the dangerous rise during the Obama years. Again, they were talking about, in fact, as I said, Janet Napolitano got skewered for having the audacity to bring it up. And it took this, I guess, for us to kind of shake awake. I'm still not confident, no matter, Merrick Garland or anyone else, that these people are truly going to be held accountable as they should be.
Mm. Yeah, and that's sort of why I have my eyes right now on the Manhattan District Attorney's Office and what sort of justice they can bring. Now, I'm the kind of person who would like to see justice doled out for each and every offense, but that's not really how the Justice Department works, at least. For example, Manafort. They could have charged him, according to Andrew Weissman, with conspiracy against the United States, in the Russia investigation, but they did not. They went after him for tax fraud, 18 counts, because that's easy. It's black and white. We have documents, open and shut. He'll go to jail. And that's sort of how we've been always proceeding. And so whether it's through the Manhattan District Attorney Cy Vance indicting Trump on his tax fraud and insurance fraud, or whether it's the next attorney general or a U.S. attorney in D.C. to charge Trump with incitation of insurrection or election interference, or whether the Fulton County, Georgia district attorney goes after him for that, I think we'll see something.
Yeah, I'm hopeful. At the end of it, it's clear that the Senate is not going to convict. And look, I held no hope whatsoever that the Senate was going to convict, which is why I thought the Democrats should have, on the morning of the 7th at 4 a.m., the second that Joe Biden was the guy, should have written the article of impeachment and moved as fast as they could to put it on McConnell's desk and get this through before Biden took office. But again, I'm not in charge, so we can armchair quarterback all we want. But at the end of it, I think this took too long.
Yeah, I'm actually on the opposite side of that. I believe that the longer we wait, and I thought it was a shrewd move by Chuck Schumer to agree to the February 8th trial start date, because I, like you, assumed that, and still assume, that they're never going to convict, whether you wrote the article of impeachment the minute after it happened, or whether you deliver the article of impeachment this week and start the trial on February 8th. But what starting the trial on February 8th does for us is it gives us more time to see more video and more evidence. Perhaps we might in that time be able to tie the White House with the lack of response for the National Guard. And I think that some of those things that, if we given it time for that evidence to come out, it might, but probably will not sway enough Republicans to vote to convict. But it's better than less evidence, I think. And not to mention, when all this new evidence comes out, even if the Republicans don't have morals, the American voters do, and they will see what has happened, and they'll look at the additional evidence and tie these Republicans to an acquittal that is could be much more difficult to make if, for instance, we see something like a direct tie or a smoking gun tying the White House to conspiring to slow down or stop the National Guard response to allow the insurrection to happen.
Yeah, see, I maybe I'm just much more jaded than you are, and have less faith in humanity than you do. But I never thought there were going to be 17 Republicans who were going to step forward ever. I'm shocked that there were 5. So the longer, in my view, you bore this out, the more that you overshadow what Biden's going to be doing and gum things up. And the more that you give the base of the Republican Party the victim card. Because, look, they don't care what Trump did. They wanted him to do it. Because I haven't heard very many Republicans coming out and condemning it. Oh, it was terrible. That was bad. There was violence. That was just a handful of people, and we'll take care of them. But it wasn't their entire structure, which is where my mindset it is. We go after the people from Trump on down who funded this stuff, who wanted this stuff, who pushed for this stuff. We find out that Trump's campaign gave $2.7 million to the organizers of this stuff. Mm-hmm. At some point, those are the people you go after, not some schmuck who took a dump on the floor. They put him in jail, yes, but it's the people who riled his behind up so that he would drop trial and take a dump on the floor.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I agree. And I think that they should be held accountable. We're just now learning about this January 5th meeting at the Trump International Hotel between a lot of the organizers of this and a lot of the beneficiaries and benefactors of the money that you talked about, the $2.7 million. We had Flynn there and Lewandowski and Bossie. And Just an interesting group of folks that just happened to be connected. And of course, now Michael Flynn's brother was in the room when the call came in for to get the National Guard going. And we don't know what's happening with Pyatt, the guy at the Army who usually is able to deploy the National Guard, but this time it was taken away from them. And then, of course, now you have the Pentagon saying, oh, no, we didn't deploy the National Guard because y'all got so mad at us when we did it last summer at the Black Lives Matters rally. So they're actually blaming Black Lives Matter for the non-response to the National Guard, which is absolutely disgusting. And then lo and behold, what did we get today? A Department of Homeland Security memo warning us of this domestic terrorist threat. And I think Andy McCabe had said this is the first time he believes this is the first time that normally those domestic terror warnings come in about when we assassinated Soleimani in Iraq, or if ISIS could be a problem. But now it's domestic violent extremism. And I'm glad that Joe Biden's administration has put together a task force to assess the danger and the threat posed by these extremists, these domestic white supremacists, Proud Boys, etc. It's a huge problem in our country, and I hope that they are able to put some policy together based on that assessment that will do some good.
Yeah, I keep asking, where's Rick Santorum now? Where's Rick Santorum when he was running around saying, Barack Obama has to say Islamo-fascist? Where's he now saying, hey, where are the Christo-fascists? Because that's these evangelical, nutcases with their gun fetishes. These are the people who have been out there and saying this stuff in public for a very long time. And as I said, for a while, all of those exercises we saw in state capitals where they were racing in Michigan to break down the doors and head into the legislature, and the ones in Virginia, those weren't just spontaneous uprisings. Those were planned military exercises. Those were shows of force, and those were figuring out how to case the joint. How are they going to respond? And they responded on the big day as they had it all steps along the way with a very weak response. And the reason all of those criminals weren't kettled all together in a giant net like they do in New York City is because it's not that they weren't prepared for it. It's that nobody told them to do it and told them to stand down. It's just my view on it, though.
Yeah, I know. I concur. I think that that's what happened there. I think that that's what happened during the insurrection. And, that memo went out January 5th telling them that you can't deploy the National Guard yourselves now. You have to go directly through Christopher Miller, the jerk I handpicked to sit atop the Pentagon a minute ago. And the Secretary of the Army, who then very, very shortly after resigned when we started finding out that about this phone call that everyone was like, what? I can't do it. Can you do it? I don't know who deploys the National Guard. Do you? I don't know. And then 2 hours later, it's a shame. It's shameful. Yeah. And I hope that they get to the bottom of it. And I think they will.
I had a listener correct me and tell me that I was totally wrong for saying that Donald Trump was AWOL during the time our nation was under attack. And because, he was nowhere to be found, evidently. From what the reports are, he was gleeful. He was watching. He was very happy that they were out there fighting for him. But he had his hands nowhere on the wheel. So if AWOL isn't the right term, what would you throw in there?
Malingering. When you say you're going to march with an army and then end up just watching it on television and cheering it on, kind of a insurrectionist dodger, maybe.
I actually like dodger. That. There you go. But the
bone spurs were acting up, Rick, so he couldn't participate in the march because his bone spurs were acting.
There you go. That could be quite frankly it. But here's the thing. As I keep thinking, the good thing is thank goodness for Parler. Thank goodness for all of the social media sites where people, were actually videotaping their treason, so that future generations will be able to see exactly what all of these crazy people were screaming about, and they'll for all eternity will be able to mock them through history. As we do Benedict Arnold, every one of them, whatever their handles were, if they put their name on it, every one of them will be able to be seen in perpetuity, their treason on record.
Yeah, 100%. And they'll also be very sad for being anti-maskers. because now we can identify all of them because they refuse to wear a mask. And I think, somebody had tweeted, it's slowly dawning on these folks why the KKK wore hoods. It's like I'm astounded, but yet not shocked.
Yeah, not shocked at all. Because here again, it comes back to what we've been saying all along. These are people who clearly believed that they were right. They clearly believed that Trump had their back, clearly believed that they had the privilege and they were entitled to do it, even though it's what they've been bashing other people for. So I find it quite comical. Just is before we move on, any favorites? Any of these videos? Because the one woman from, I think, Tennessee who was crying that they maced her. She goes, I got my foot in there and they maced me. And the guy goes, well, what are you doing here? It's a revolution. I'm going, so a little mace stopped your revolution? A little pepper spray ended your revolution? That's it? Now you go home?
Yeah, I think that ranks up there as one of my favorites. But I'm also more interested in the military hands on the shoulders line, headed up the stairs of the Capitol. The practiced veterans who trained off site for this. And it's just that old adage coming back, like, yeah, you want to have your Second Amendment rights and be a well-armed militia. Do you think you will defeat the United States of America with your AR-15? They didn't have those, granted, but you'll learn quickly that you won't. Our Constitution will stand, and the Constitution will win the day every single time. Yeah. But we have to we have to protect and defend it.
Yeah. Now, I just saw a report today that just came out that evidently a bunch of federal judges are now retiring because Joe Biden will be the one to replace them. So the thought that Trump had packed enough of the court so these people can get away with stuff, hopefully not the case.
Yeah, I didn't think about that there were probably people waiting to retire, so that they could be replaced by a sensible person. That's good. That's a good report. I like that report.
Yeah. We've got a lot of work to do. Real quick, so far the Biden administration, good grades. Where do you put it?
Excellent grades. Everything is a first step. He's kind of ruling by executive order right now. I'm hoping that Chuck Schumer, now that he has the gavels, will change the rules of budget reconciliation so it doesn't have to be about money, and we can circumvent the filibuster by being able to pass all legislation with a simple majority. That's what I'm hoping happens.
See, I think the filibuster compromise is very simple. You can filibuster anytime you want. You just have to hold the floor. That's it.
Yep.
Yeah, you get your phone book, get your empty jug, do what you got to do. Keep talking. You can filibuster as long as you want.
Well, that's how we were taught, was how it was supposed to work when we were kids. Right?
Mr. Smith went to Washington. Absolutely. But Allison, I appreciate the time. Great talking with you. Make sure you check out Allison's podcast, Mueller, She Wrote, the Daily Beans podcast, also the new one, Clean Up on Aisle 45. Thanks so much. Appreciate it.
Thanks. Great talking to you, Rick.
Good stuff. Our friend, Dr. Allison Gill. Quick break. Right back. Stick around. You're listening to The Rick Smith Show.
Remembering that united we bargain, divided we beg. Rick Smith.
I'm Rick Smith, and this is Labor History in 2. On this day in labor history, the year was 1950. The cost of a first-class stamp was 3 cents. And starting on this day, one of the options for first-class postage bore the image of U.S. labor leader Samuel Gompers. The British-born Gompers was a founder and longtime head of the American Federation of Labor. The Postal Service authorized 112 million copies of the Gompers stamp. He was not the only labor leader to be commemorated with a stamp. A. Philip Randolph, head of the first National Black Union, the Brotherhood of Sleeping Car Porters, was honored in 1989. 5 years later, George Meany, who led the AFL-CIO for nearly 2 decades, was featured. Cesar Chavez, the co-founder of the United Farm Workers, was pictured in 2003. In 2013, the U.S. Postal Service issued a series of stamps titled Made in America, Building a Nation. This set of stamps featured 12 historic black and white photos of men and women at work. One was of a welder working on the Empire State Building. Others featured a miner, a textile worker, and a railroad worker. The stamps included 11 images by Louis Hine, a famous photographer of working people. Secretary of Labor Tom Perez said, "Stamps are like a miniature American portrait gallery. They are an expression of our values and a connection to our past. That's why it's so fitting that this series depicts Americans at work. These iconic images tell a powerful story about American economic strength and prosperity. These men and women and millions like them really did build a nation." If you could pick one working class image to be featured on a stamp, what would you choose? A politician, a labor leader, or a nurse, construction worker, or postal worker? Labor History in 2 brought to you by the Illinois Labor History Society and The Rick Smith Show. For more information, go to laborhistoryin2.com.
Welcome back to the Rick Smith Show. Now, here is Rick Smith.
So some really good news coming out of the Bronx in New York. You remember we were talking about the Hunts Point produce market strike where the workers were going on strike because, hey, they wanted a raise. How dare they? But the company offered them, I think something like 30 cents, like 32 cents an hour. They wanted $1. And they said, look, we worked through this pandemic. We're the ones who risked our lives to keep the community fed and the corporate profits rolling. We want a part of it. And they went out on strike, and it was a big deal. You had AOC show up. You had like 100 cops swarm them. It was a big deal. Well, they just held the vote. They ratified a new contract, $1.85 over 3 years, and the big part, they don't have to pay a dime out of pocket for their health care costs. This is a big deal. And this is the stuff I hope we see much, much more of people coming together and saying we demand better. That idea of union job, better life, absolutely. And here to share some thoughts on how we take that to our transit heroes, the people who showed up every single day to get people to work, the nurses, these food workers to their jobs during the heart of the pandemic. And I don't think got enough credit for it. That's why I've asked Kenneth Kirk to come talk with us. Kenneth is the International Secretary-Treasurer of the Amalgamated Transit Union, ATU. Kenneth, thanks for taking time for us.
I didn't hear you.
Thanks for taking some time for us.
Yeah, I'm glad to, and President Costa sends his regards.
It's great to hear. So, we're in this moment where, as I said, we're in a moment where you had all during the pandemic, we're saying, oh, they're heroes, they're essential workers, we care, but we didn't really pay them. And what really mattered, we didn't really honor them because their working conditions didn't get all that much better. And we really kind of took it for granted. And now we don't even talk about that anymore. I think that's a shame.
I do too. We still have a lot of members out there that's passing away, and we got a lot of people that's getting sick, and we can't even get a hazard pay or any type of protection from COVID that we should be getting.
Yeah, I remember stories of your locals all across New York and New Jersey going out and going to the Home Depot or wherever they could get PPE for their members, going out and just getting that stuff where the transit authorities weren't, our government wasn't, and just kind of leaving them out in the cold. And some of the horror stories that I've heard, shameful. I mean, I go back to that word, shameful.
Yeah, they're shameful, and the big challenge today is the vaccine and getting everybody vaccinated, and dealing with that whole issue of who wants it and who don't want it. And so we're still out here trying to serve the public and keep transit moving despite all of that.
Yeah, I mean, look, if you don't want to get the vaccine, move aside. Let those of us who do get it, let's move forward. Let's get past this. Let's get life somewhere back to normal. But here's the thing: it's going to be a transition. It's going to be hard work, and it's going to take some actual planning. which is why I'm glad to see that you guys are part of this organization that's having a community hearing to talk about public transit. You're calling it a national conversation, saying that the economy will not run without transit. And I think we learned that during the pandemic. Had the trains not run, had the buses not run, people wouldn't have gotten to work and would have been much, much worse off. Tell me about what you're doing during this community hearing, this national conversation event.
Yeah, so on February the 3rd and February the 4th, we're going to have a national conference where we're going to have different advocacy groups, whether they be bus passengers and climate, green people to come in. And we're going to do a 2-day workshop, which I will serve as on the panel on the very first day in the opening session. Also, during the transit day, we're going to have other locals out leafleting and doing different things. In the past, we've even had free ride days, etc. And just so everybody knows, this all started by our past president, Larry Hanley, who left us unfortunately. He wanted to dedicate a day to Rosa Parks on her birthday, February the 4th. As we all know, she took the big step of making transit a civil rights issue. And, we know transit is something it's a civil rights issue. Everybody should have a right to public transit, just like we should have a right to medical care. So we're going to have this 2-day online testimony from workers and riders and critical public transit. And we just invite everybody to participate. It's open to the public, and to share a few things with you. I don't have the agenda in front of me, but if anyone wanted the agenda, they can go to laborforsustainability.org. The whole agenda is on there for your review and with information about it. And we'll be glad to see you there, and maybe we'll get to talk in more detail.
Right. And we'll make sure that we get the link out for folks through our social media that they can go right to it and sign up. Because, look, I think educating people about how important public transit is really, really important. When I lived in Cleveland, there was a pretty good transit system. The RTA was a pretty good system. It wasn't enough. I always thought we should have had much more opportunity to use it, but it was still a reasonably good system. I always wondered what would have happened if the buses ran every 15 minutes instead of every 45. The trains ran every 10 minutes instead of every 30. Would people then use it more? Because I think the future for us in this country is moving to more public transit, more ability to get around without having to drive cars and upkeep roads and all of that stuff. So I think it's a conversation, especially as we're talking about moving to a greener economy, that absolutely has to be had.
Yes, in fact, we're going to be talking about that and having a green economy. As you well know, President Biden has said that he's going to make that a big part of things going forward to create new jobs, green jobs, electrical buses, gas buses, natural gas buses, and those types of things to try to make, because as we know, you can get 40 people on a bus, but you got one person in the car. Transportation is the way for us to improve the environment and the climate as well.
Yeah, I always say, well, whether you're going to use public transit or not, that's going to get all those people in front of you off the road, so you'll be able to get to work faster. If you can get, like you said, if you can get 39 more people off the road, you may have a better shot at getting to work on time. And because the reality is our infrastructure was built for traffic, 20 years ago. We keep growing exponentially, and we're not growing our roads. You're not seeing them double. You're not seeing the availability of more transit happening. In fact, you see it because of costs and lack of investment. You see it shrinking. The fact that I live near Harrisburg, the state capital of Pennsylvania, and I can't get to our nation's capital unless I go all the way over to Philadelphia and then come all the way back is insane to me. There should be a direct line from Harrisburg, the state capital of this state, to our nation's capital, and it should be 20 minutes, 30 minutes at most.
Yes, sir.
So how do we get to that place, Kenneth? How do we get to a place? How do we excite people around the idea of, we got to do things smarter. Let's leave some infrastructure for our children and our grandchildren where they're going to look back like we do to Eisenhower going, you know what? He built the interstate highway system. Nice job. How about we build something like that scale with public transit?
Well, first we've got to convince people to put investment, particularly citizens and the government. We can have those 15-minute buses that you want if we had more public money into transit, and if we had people that was more interested in riding, where we could create more funds so we could become more dependable by raising more funds. So it's kind of a difficult thing. I know we in some places we work really hard at that. In some places we don't work really hard at it. Like New York, they work really hard at that. But like in Dallas, Texas, where I'm from, people love cars and they don't get it.
I love my car too, but you know what? I don't want to be sitting in traffic in it all day long either. And the sad reality is, and look, I used to, when I lived in Cleveland, like I said, I used to take the Rapid into downtown, and it was always crowded. I mean, you were literally like a sardine. If we were running more of them, if we had more capacity, you could make it more comfortable. You could make it less sardine-like during rush hours, and more comfortable. And I think people would then get used to having a little bit more space and being able to use those in a way that fit their lives. This idea that I can get downtown by 5 o'clock and after 6, maybe you get home or maybe you don't, is insane to me. We need massive investments, and I have the way we can do it. We stop giving the oil companies the massive subsidies we've been giving them the last 100 years, and we use that to invest in the future. What do you think of that idea?
Well, I think that would be a great idea, but we also got to deal with the car dealers and the people who build all this concrete to make them understand that we're eventually going to run out of space. Therefore, we're going to need public transit so we can carry people in large volumes. And it's much faster, it's environmental friendly, and it helps our climate and our environment. Just a matter of convincing the right people and making public transit more available for people to use.
Right. Does it have to be a Hunger Games? I mean, because what you've basically laid out is a Hunger Games scenario where if we do invest in public transit, well, we can't build roads. I still think we're going to need the roads and bridges. I don't see those going away. I just see the capacity being overtaxed and us being just gridlocked at some point, to where if you're not creating new capacity for new people to move around, we're just going to end up eventually everything stops.
Yeah, my point was we're building too many roads, and we should put more money into public transit as opposed to just steady building roads. As you can see, in some places those roads are empty, but because they got so much concrete out there. But I hear you. I don't have the answer at this time, but I'm working toward it.
Yeah, how much, again, we're in this weird kind of moment in our society where, we're kind of pitted against each other. It's male against female, black against white. We're in this weird world. How much do you think the negatives of transit have to do with stereotypes of people who use transit? Because I'll tell you, when I lived in Cleveland, I used it all the time. But I'm curious of your thought on that.
Yeah, well, we know for a fact that that's one of the challenges we have, is that most people who have more money don't like to use transit, and they try to categorize it as a way for the poor, and only the poor people ride. And, some people just doesn't take advantage of all the things that we can offer in transit, and they maybe only use it to go back and forth to work, but they could use it for many things, like going to a crowded central business districts. If you could use transit, you wouldn't have to worry about parking. You wouldn't have all these crowded streets and bumper to bumper traffic. So I think just trying to convince people, there's lots of things that over the years transit has tried to do, like offer bus passes to these different companies and subsidize some companies through working to try to encourage people to ride the bus more and to ride the trains more. So I think that if we can figure out a way to convince people that transit is for everyone, and maybe we can appeal to their environmental concerns and concerns for the climate.
Yeah. What are your thoughts on giving free, or just having public transit free? That we just, as a matter of funding the commons like we do on the roads. The roads are mostly free. We've got some that have cash boxes on it, but you can drive on most roads free. What do you think of the argument? Hey, just let people ride public transit for free.
That would be a great idea to let people ride public transit for free, but then we would have to convince the people to pay for it. And pretty much public transit is, in a way, free because the amount of fares that people pay don't usually cover the full fare.
Right.
So we could just improve it just a little bit. I think if more people rode, then they would appreciate it. You don't pay directly for the police or the fire department, so why pay for the public transit? That's my argument.
I'm right there with you. Now, I'm not entirely for the idea of free public transit, because people who can afford it would get it for free and they would pay for it anyway, like I used to going downtown, because I took the Rapid down because it was cheaper than paying parking. It just worked out really well, and I think we have to make some of those arguments. So let me ask you, last line of questioning I want to get into is, how do we get people turned around on this? I know people who have never ridden a bus. I mean, it's completely out of my ability to fathom how you could never have ridden a bus, but there are some people who have never done it. How do you get those people to go, yeah, this is a good idea, we should be expanding it?
Well, I think it goes back to your first comments. We have to make the service more efficient and more readily available. I think once people can understand that they can get from one point to another just as fast on transit as they can in cars, because that's the biggest argument that you hear, that it takes longer. But if we could just make it more frequent and more consistent, then I think we would get more people to ride. And that's pretty much all I can think of at the moment.
Yeah, and look, every time we go into New York or we go to Chicago or we go someplace where they have a good functional, or even Cleveland, when I go back home to visit, I make sure that the kids ride the public transit and that you learn how to use it and you learn how to get around, because it's important, because I do think it is the future. I do think that we have to move to this, and I think we got to train the next generation to go, yeah, we want this and we're going to fight for it and we're going to make sure that it's accessible. Because this is, for me, the idea, maybe not for my generation, but for my kids, they're going to be the ones I hope that push this.
Well, younger kids have taken to transit more, because if you notice that the trend is a lot of younger kids don't even have driver's license. They like taking Uber, but we want them on public transit and not necessarily Uber. But there's a lot of, that's why you see these bicycles at these racks and these scooters. There's a lot of people that's getting away from getting driver's license and even purchasing cars, because sometimes their economy of scales doesn't allow them to. So I see with the younger people that they're more enthusiastic about transit than the older people. We got to figure out a way to get the older people on the buses. Yeah,
just leave them. The future is the younger generation. Leave those old fogies behind. Let them walk. That's pretty horrible, isn't it? But Kenneth, I appreciate your time, man. I wish you the best on Wednesday and Thursday, February 3rd and 4th. The conference, I believe, starts at 3 p.m. on Wednesday. The Transit Equity Network. We'll get links out on how you can take a look at it, sign up, and be part of that. Any final thoughts?
Well, my only final thought is I'd just like to thank you for having me on. And this is my first time on one of these shows. As you can see, I'm a little uptight, but tell folks I usually think a lot quicker and a lot faster, but Rick had me nervous. Thank you, Rick, for letting me come, and the ATU appreciate you letting everybody know about our Transit Equity Day. We hope that everybody will join in and be with us for those 2 days, or any parts of either one of the days that you can be. Just remember that transit is a civil right, and everybody should have a right to public transit. And thank you very much.
Good stuff, Kenneth. I appreciate it. Thanks so much, man. Kenneth, no, I mean, we need to really be pushing this in a really big way, in my view. But Kenneth Kirk, Secretary Treasurer there of ATU, the Amalgamated Transit Union. Quick break, right back. Stick around. You're listening to The Rick Smith Show. We're working people. Come to talk.
Remembering that united we bargain, divided we beg. Rick Smith.
What does your toothbrush, a fish dinner, and your running shoes have in common? Plastic. We now live on planet plastic. Billions of tons of waste from everyday products made of these chemical contaminants are strewn literally everywhere, on the highest mountaintops, into the deepest seabeds, in dense tropical jungles, and all across barren deserts. It's estimated, for example, that in less than 30 years, the gross volume of discarded plastic in our oceans will outnumber fish. From grocery carry-out bags to shower curtains to almost invisible bits of microplastics, the vast tonnage of this trash increases every minute, with an afterlife lasting centuries, wreaking havoc on ecosystems, destroying species, and infusing our water, air, soil, food, and us. Consider just two common products, your toothbrush and your sneakers. Until the 1930s, toothbrushes were made of degradable natural components. Since then, practically all have been throwaway plastic brushes. But there is no away, so nearly all of the trillions of brushes we've discarded in the past century are still out there, somewhere on the land or in our water. Moving from your teeth to your feet, consider that millions of sneakers are sold in the U.S. each year, advertised as being athletic and cool. What's uncool is that they're made almost entirely of melted and molded plastics that are practically impossible to recycle. So, after a short time in our closets, sneakers spend an eternity as globs of toxic plastic trash. This is Jim Hightower saying, we're being choked by our own synthetic waste, from billions of plastic bottles and cigarette filters to tons of straws and synthetic rubber tires. To help stop the insanity, contact Beyond Plastics, beyondplastics.org.
Hightower's commentaries are brought to you by the Hightower Lowdown, the monthly newsletter with Hightower's take on what Wall Street and Washington are up to. For information, visit hightowerlowdown.org.
I'm David Philman, Executive Director of AFSCME Council 13. AFSCME members enforce regulations, keep prisoners behind bars, take care of patients, protect the environment, and more. Chances are you may never see that AFSCME member working in a sewage plant, diving underwater to repair a bridge, inspecting an elevator, or answering a 911 call. But aren't you glad they do? For more information, visit AFSCME13.org.
Welcome back to the Rick Smith Show. Now, here is Rick Smith.
So it's school choice week, and the folks who seem to never run out of money or time, they're out there promoting school choice. They're back in high gear, touting the wonders of their particular scheme, and yeah. No one seems to be promoting what I think is the best choice, which is a well-funded local community public school. I don't see any of that being touted as a choice. I guess the reason is your local public school, that local community school, they're too busy educating our kids and they don't have enough funding to waste on TV and radio ads and all of that stuff. Instead, they're buying books and computers and trying to pay their teachers. Which I guess not such a priority in the other choices, but I guess there's not enough cash to be made off the local public schools. So I've now got to hear radio ads and TV ads and be inundated with emails about we need more choice. I got an idea. How about you give me one really good choice so I can make that? How about you give me the absolute best possible we can get? Put all that funding where it belongs instead of divide and conquer. Just a thought. Anyway, here in School Choice Week, one of the choices some people make is they decide to homeschool their kids. So we decided to go out and find the guy who's literally writing the book on the history of homeschooling. That's why I've asked Jameson Brewer to come talk with us. He's an assistant professor of social foundations of education in the teaching education department there at the University of North Georgia. Jameson, thanks for taking time for us.
Thanks for having me on, Rick.
So school choice week. Big fan of school choice week, are you?
Not so much. I mean, it certainly as a public school researcher and a school choice researcher, it is the sort of Super Bowl, as it were, for someone like me. But I myself am was schooled in public schools. I'm a former public school teacher I think you're leading to this conversation. I think the best choice is clear. I think that's a fully funded public school system.
All right, that's a good place to start because, I see you literally wrote the book on homeschooling. So I was expecting you to go, no, by far the best choice is homeschooling. And you may still say that. So you going there?
No, not going there. And, to your point, and thinking about school choice, homeschooling is, in fact, the sort of epitome of school choice, and in particular, thinking about schooling as a sort of individualistic commodity. And it's a full shifting of our understanding of what it means to be both a teacher and a learner, removing it from a professional sense, removing it from the public, removing it from this common space that provides a service not only to the individual student, but to the common good in society. It is in all the forms of school choice, whether it's charters or vouchers, homeschooling is sort of that a bit on steroids.
Yeah, I see. And I'm sure you're going to walk me through the history of homeschooling, but my uneducated eye and the people that I've known who have done it over the years do it for a couple of reasons. There are a couple of different groups. One of them are really, really smart people who they think that they know everything and their kid's going to be, the greatest at everything, and they usually do really well. And then there's the other segment of the people who are total control freaks and mostly religious, extreme kind of mentality who believe that the Bible's all you need to have, the quotum and totem people. Those are, in my experience, those are the two groups who I see as being the charter or the homeschool people. Am I somewhere near correct on this?
Yeah, that's right. And, and not so much going really further into the history of it. Schooling children at home, and I'm using the word schooling sort of loosely, but parents teaching their children at home is really the oldest form of schooling that we have. But that's sort of socializing and raising and rearing, where what we're talking about here is schooling, right? And this has really come out during this pandemic, with the push to digital learning at home. There's been lots of conversation of, well, this is homeschooling. Well, no, that's schooling at home because the curriculum and instruction is still being provided by professional teachers. That's different than homeschooling.
Right.
And to your point, yes, there's a huge swath of the homeschooling population that does it for religious reasons. Some of the data that we do have, and as a side note, we really just don't have a lot of transparent data on the homeschooling population, and some of that is by design, right? That's sort of withdrawing from the public space. But yeah, they generally say that they want to provide some type of religious instruction, or they give sort of broad, sweeping statements that they have concern about the school environment and safety and things like that. And within that, there could, of course, be religious motivations behind that, and there's certainly political motivations that a lot of families will school at home. And yeah, a lot of smart families do. But I've got to be honest with you. I think that I'm relatively smart in some areas, but I would never suggest that if my daughter falls off of her bike and breaks her arm or needs stitches, that I could provide her with that level of treatment at home, regardless of how smart I might fancy myself to be. And so there are a lot of reasons and rationales that people will do that. But at the fundamental core, it is a form of school choice that is largely inaccessible to most families simply because of the cost involved.
Right. So what you're telling me is, kid falls off the bike, breaks the arm. You're not running to the garage for the duct tape. That's not happening.
No, that's right. And and this is where a lot of this debate over homeschooling comes in. This question about parent sovereignty in terms of overseeing their child's development compared to what the public's obligation is to ensuring that the next generation has a standard of socialization and learning. Yeah, I think every parent has an experience of, the child falling off a bike or whatever it might be, and they scrape their knee and they put a bandage or Band-Aid on it, and that's well and fine. But it does take an incredible amount of hubris, it seems to me, to think that anything more serious than that a parent could fix it themselves, right, with whatever the essential oils or whatever the craze might be these days that is sort of anti-professional of the medical world. And that's the same thing here. Educating our children is the most important thing that we can do as parents and as a society. And so it seems to me that the suggestion that somebody, and in most states you need only have a high school diploma yourself, that can be done is quite problematic, I think.
No, it's extremely problematic because I actually know somebody who does the homeschooling thing, and it's the religion. It's religion for them. They are probably further off the mainstream than the vast majority. But here's somebody who admitted he barely got out of high school. His wife was a little bit better off, and they're now in charge of their kids, the rest of their kids' life. And for me, I don't know that I could take that kind of responsibility because I know I don't know enough. And look, I've got advanced degrees. I think I'm somewhat reasonably intelligent. But I know I couldn't be in charge of their every learning opportunity. I want to add to that by teaching them what we can at home. But I in no way can possibly take on that kind of responsibility, and knowing that I don't know as much as I should.
And I think, and I agree with you, and I really hope, and I think that at the beginning of this pandemic, with the shift to digital learning, there seemed to be a broad societal consensus of celebrating the work that professional teachers do. I in my day-to-day job, I train future teachers. My first grader is home with me during the day when I'm not on campus teaching, and I'm listening in and helping her with the technology if she needs help. But I'm listening to the instruction from her teachers and the care that they put into providing her with not only sound curriculum, but also responding to her needs. I am reminded every day that I could not do that. I don't have the knowledge that they do that is specific to their age group that they are working with and the experience that they have to do that. And I teach teachers how to be teachers. And so for somebody to have no training in that, again, it sort of magnifies this problem multiple times in my view.
Yeah, I mean, but I've been saying for a long time, Jameson, that there's been a movement in this country to move the profession of educator into factory work. That every kid is like a little widget or whatnot, and you just open their little head and pour in information and you stamp them out. Where I think we're starting to learn because of this pandemic that it's a lot more than that. That you can't just plop a kid down in front of a screen and go. It just doesn't work. And I think maybe, at least I'm hopeful. I'm hopeful that on the other side of this pandemic, we're a little bit more grateful for having teachers. And then this whole cyber charter nonsense, like we have here in Pennsylvania, eventually gets crushed.
Yeah, I'm hopeful too. I have been a little bit disheartened over the past few months, especially as we moved into this new semester of this question about reopening and how to reopen. And then it seems to me that a lot of teachers, and particularly here in the state of Georgia, received a lot of animosity from parents demanding that it be open. And, if you don't want to teach in the building, get another job and things like that. But I think that from a policy standpoint, and I do policy research, I think unfortunately we've seen politicians push for more things like homeschooling or like vouchers in the face of schools navigating how to open and when to open and what that might look like. And we're seeing this big influx of people suggesting, well, we need to have vouchers for homeschooling. We need to have vouchers for private schools because they're not closing down. And obviously that is doing nothing but draining not only financial resources from the public school, but again, the capital that people bring into those buildings too, the children that are there, their parents that would otherwise be involved in the school. And so I think, unfortunately, some policymakers are using it as an opportunity to engage in disaster capitalism.
Yeah, no. One of the things that you just said something a minute ago that I've been against for a very long time, and saying is a goal of the homeschool movement, and that is to pay the parents for educating the kids, because every school district puts a number on the kid. Some school districts are $8,000, $9,000, $10,000 a year. So you got 2 or 3 kids, that could be $20,000, $30,000 a year. That the parents are getting paid to not educate the kids fully. And immediately my mind starts going, if we're allowed to let that happen, the next generation of kids are definitely going to be dumber, and the generation that are going to be dumber. And we're going to eventually be that satire movie, Idiocracy.
Yeah, absolutely. And, and whether it's homeschooling or any other iteration of school choice, this mindset of it's my kid, it's my money, right? The tax money that's going to provide this education. Let me have it and let me decide what to do with it. Rick, if I say, listen, I no longer want to spend my money on the local police department. I want that money back. We'll call the voucher, and I will hire a private protection company to protect my house, or private fire company to protect my house. Society will collapse very quickly. And I also think that you likely will never find anybody, or very few, that would say, hey, the proposal of me getting my money back to not fund the local police department, but for me to pay for my own private security detail, most people would point out that that's an asinine suggestion. And so for me, the fact that we entertain the exact same thing in education at all boggles my mind.
Yeah, immediately my mind is going, because whenever someone says, give the money to the parents, let them do with, what's in the best interest of the child, I'm going, I don't know. And this is going to sound really horrible, but I don't know that the vast majority of people can do what's actually in the best interest of the child. They may do what's in the best interest that they think for them and the kid, but not really, especially if you don't know what the best interest is. I just find that argument so hollow.
Yeah, it is. And before I say what I'm about to say, I want to be very clear. I'm not about to suggest that people who homeschool abuse their children. But to your point, just since this pandemic has started, there has been about a 50% reduction in reports to DFACS, or whatever the state, whatever they call it in your state, in terms of questions or raising concerns about how children are being treated at home. And so when you remove that check-in that another human being, an adult, has on the life of a child, from somebody who thinks that they either are or whatever however they're justifying how they're treating a child, it's problematic, right? And so it's imperative that, yes, parents teach their children their own family values and things like that. I don't think anybody would suggest otherwise, but there has to be some broader connection to society for children to make sure that they are being taken care of, that they're in good full health, both physically and mentally, as they grow into an adult on their own, who will then make choices that may or may not reflect what their parents wanted them to think 18 years ago. Yeah. And it's the role of society to do that, and schools are the function in which we all collectively come together to make sure that happens.
No, as I tell my kids, all the time, school is about more than just, reading what's in the book. It's about learning how to interact in society. It's about learning how to be a citizen. It's about learning to deal with diversity and different types and different personalities. And I think by shielding kids too much, by putting them in an environment like we're talking about, actually causes them potentially great harm down the road, in that they're not going to know how to deal with it. And, I stop and I think of a girl that I knew in college, years and years ago. She was homeschooled. She was a preacher's kid, and, completely shielded, had no real interaction outside of anyone but the church. And, within the first week, she went to a party, she got drunk for the first time, she had sex for the first time, all this stuff, for the first time. And then she ended up getting pregnant and attempting suicide, because she couldn't handle all of the stuff that she was thrown at her in such a short period of time as an adult. And my mind keeps going back to that, because I don't think I ever want to see a child saddled with that kind of situation ever.
Yeah, and obviously so. I mean, I think that thinking about these sort of homeschool bubbles, as they are, for anybody who's having a hard time understanding what that might look like, I think there's a little bit of analogy to social media and the echo chambers that a lot of us have found ourselves in, and to where we've gotten to the point where we cannot comprehend anything other than our own particular political worldview. And when that's challenged, we react viscerally to that, right? Whether it's anger or disbelief or whatever that might be. And one of the many purposes of schools, and you noted this, is teaching children how to engage with one another, how to be in a diverse society, right? So the United States is, famously this grand melting pot. We can't do that if all of us are running to our little corners, and whether that's in a homeschool, whatever that might be, and thinking that that's the best case forward. And for an adult who's doing that, obviously that's problematic, but making that choice for a child and having that be the only choice is quite frightening.
Well, let me ask you this, because obviously you're the guy who's written the book on homeschooling and the history of it here in the country. A lot of my belief comes, you go back to the desegregation of the 70s with all the busing and all the stuff, the desegregation of the 60s, the busing of the 70s. You had, all these ideas that came to integrate schools and to mix people up. I believe that's when the voucher stuff and the charter school, movement, outside of what was envisioned by Albert Shanker of the teachers union on doing things differently and experimenting and sharing best practices, to what they've now become little silos. Much like what you're saying, we're going to have our little group here and one groups, and it's not just white people, it's everybody, because you've got different silo schools. That is the worst in my view of all alternatives.
Yeah, you're right. A question that I always ask my pre-service teachers is, in what year in U.S. history were schools the most segregated? And the answer is almost usually this year, right? Because even in a post-Brown world, and not all of it is because of school choice, but we do know from decades of empirical research now that school choice, whether it is charters or vouchers or homeschooling, exacerbate racial segregation further than what public schools already do. And to be fair, my critique of homeschool and vouchers or charters, whatever that might be, should not be, in terms of how they exacerbate segregation, should not be understood as a sort of an endorsement of how public schools do it. No, we need to do better with public schools. We need to reconsider our efforts to desegregate public schools, but having them further segregate based on racial lines and class lines, and that is usually where it is, right? Class. If you want to go to a charter school, well, you have to pay for your own transportation. Same thing with a private school. If you want to homeschool, well, you have to have at least one parent who's willing to give up a salary. That is an incredibly expensive proposition. And, of course, in this country, it tracks the racial segregation that we've had in this country, and it only makes things worse. It certainly does not make anything better.
Yeah, so to wrap this kind of up, because my thoughts are here during School Choice Week, since they keep pushing this at me as, we want to talk about how wonderful choice is. I want one really good choice. I mean, I think the mass of people don't necessarily want choices between bad or worse or a little bit better or almost as good. I think we don't want all of those choices. I think we want one really good choice. And that is, in my view, something local, something well-funded, something with the kind of opportunities that I had growing up. I think that's what people want.
I think it is too. And, Pew does this research every year. They ask parents and local adults to rate their local schools. And almost always, they rate their local schools at an A or an A+. It's only when they're asked about the schools over there, and I'm doing air quotes, over there, and whether that's over there across the tracks or across the state or whatever that might be, that they say, well, they're failing, right? And so we know that parents love their local schools. We know that students love their teachers. They love their local public schools. It's only this manufactured crisis that they're failing, right, that has created the opportunity for this solution in search of a problem to present itself, and whether that's homeschooling or vouchers or charters, it simply doesn't align with what we understand parents and teachers to like, and certainly nothing of what the data says.
Yeah, it's crazy, but it is what it is. Jameson, I appreciate the time. Good stuff as always. Look forward to talking to you again.
Perfect. Thanks so much, Rick. All
right, Jameson Brewer, Assistant Professor of Social Foundations of Education in the Teaching Education Department there at the University of North Georgia. Yeah, I got to tell you, I've done I know people who have done that, the homeschooling thing. Always very troubling. Just is what it is. Love to hear your thoughts. Do you have a good example of where it went really well? I have one, but far and few between. Quick break, right back. Stick around.
Saving work in America, one show at a time. The Rick Smith Show.
I'm Rick Smith, and this is Labor History in 2. On this day in labor history, the year was 1908. That was the day the United States Supreme Court ruled that bans on yellow dog contracts were unconstitutional in the case of Adair versus United States. The case served to nullify the Erdman Act of 1898, which banned such contracts for those who worked on moving trains in the railroad industry. The Erdman Act had been a response to the 1894 Pullman strike. At the time, the federal government smashed workers striking against deep wage cuts and for union recognition with Eugene V. Debs's American Railway Union. Seeking to prevent any disruptions along the railroads, the Erdman Act banned any contracts that required workers to renounce unions in order to gain employment, recognize the right of union organizations as a means of collective bargaining, and established mechanisms for the arbitration of grievances. In 1906, William Adair, a supervisor with the Louisville and Nashville Railroad, fired a member of the Order of Locomotive Firemen for his membership. Adair was indicted under the Erdman Act, found guilty, and fined. He then appealed to the U.S. Supreme Court and won. The Supreme Court ruled that the Erdman Act violated the Due Process Clause of the Fifth Amendment and served to supersede the Commerce Clause in the Constitution. The court argued that the railroad's employment decisions were a protected right so long as they did not injure the public interest. Congress could not criminalize the firing of an employee because of union membership. Dissenting opinions centered on the potential for renewed labor conflict. Workers would have to wait almost 25 years for yellow dog contracts to be banned in all industries with the passage of the 1932 Norris-LaGuardia Act. Labor History in 2 brought to you by the Illinois Labor History Society and The Rick Smith Show. For more information, go to laborhistoryin2.com.
Welcome back to The Rick Smith Show. Now, here is Rick Smith.
So I got a message during the break on the homeschooling. Look, this person says, I know people who've homeschooled their kids. They do a good job of it. It's a lot of work, but they have networks. They've built that. They've created their own little schools. And I understand that. There are some people who do the homeschooling thing. They do it okay. Those are generally people who are more affluent, as I think Jameson was pointing out, the people who can afford to have someone stay home and are willing to basically be a teacher for their kid, to hover over them at every moment and be the helicopter parents that they've always wanted to be. And live vicariously through them. That's been my experience of the kids who have done well. And I've known a couple that have won spelling bees and gone on to national things, and they do amazing weird science projects because their entire life and the life of that parent is the education. And look, if every person who homeschooled did that, I wouldn't be against it. I wouldn't be. If you set up networks where you went on field trips and you did all these other things like some of the more affluent people can do, great. In fact, I know of one group where they'll bring in a tutor to come and teach certain topics, and they have guest lecturers and stuff. It's a well thought out thing. I'm not against them doing that. These are people of absolute means. My problem comes, and maybe this is just me being classist. But I think back to the guy we used to call Snaggletooth, the place where I used to work. He had 5 kids. In his 30s, a handful of teeth. But 5 kids. Wife didn't finish high school. He was a truck driver. I'm not saying truck drivers are stupid. I've been in the trucking industry over 30 years. But this is a guy who, did it purely for religious reasons. And he was one of these guys who went to what I affectionately call a snake venom church. These were the people who reach into the box and pick up the snakes. I don't understand it. I don't get it. I don't get why I need to almost have myself killed to prove some weird thing. But okay, they do that. These are the folks who are, basically training their kids to be the next generation of people who reach into the box. Now, the weird thing about reaching into the box, and this was explained to me by my friend Snaggletooth, I said, well, what happens if you get bitten? I mean, does anyone ever get bitten? He's going, oh yeah, we get, every once in a while, someone gets bitten. And I'm going, okay. He goes, yeah, I got bitten right here. And he shows me this mark. And I go, whoa, wait a second. So you got bitten by the poisonous snake. Why are you still here? He goes, oh, well, we've got the antivenom, on site. I'm going, wait a second. So hold on. So the whole meaning of this exercise is to test God for you to live or die based on the purity of the snake, whether the snake bites you or not, right? So if the snake bites you, God's kind of mad and you're going to die, right? Well, kind of. I said, but you're usurping God's will by going, ha, 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 ha. I've got this. I'm not dying. Am I getting this right? He goes, no. He goes, God wants us to have the antivenom. I go, wait a second. So if God wants you to have the antivenom, why did he bite you in the first place? I mean, I don't get, why do the whole thing anyway? Because I thought it was about whether you live or die. And he didn't really have an answer for that. And so I'm going, well, why do the whole exercise? I mean, it's really kind of crazy. Now, the reason I tell this story is he homeschooled 5 kids. Those 5 kids are all on some form of public assistance. Those 5 kids went on to have 5 kids. So you start multiplying this out and you start going, well, wait a second. How much are we going to have to pay for because you thought that you're smarter than everybody else by sticking your hand in the box, and now we've got to, as a society, pay for this. And even if we didn't have social programs, which I'm not advocating taking away from them, but if this is what we're going to allow to have happen, this is bad. So maybe if we're going to allow people to homeschool, maybe making sure that there's someone overseeing it. Now, I'm told that there's supposed to be, but guess what? It's really hard to do. And there's a lot of people doing it. And I know we used to have tests and all kinds of stuff. But it's, and this is the weird part. Everything in the state that I live in, and probably in every state in this country, is about religious freedom. I'm doing it because I have a religious exemption. I have a sincerely held religious belief. Like when I decided that I didn't want my kids wasting their time taking the standardized tests at the end of the year that gave me results of what they knew in March, in November, I had to go to the school and say, I have a religious problem with you giving my kid this test. And I would tell the principal, I'm telling you this because that's the only avenue you've given me. I can make a religious argument, the ethic of reciprocity, do unto others, all that stuff. That's a religious argument, I believe, but I think it's just plain stupid that I have to lie and say that. The tests are horrible. It's bad. I don't want the kids taking them. That's the real reason. But we do so much in the name of religion. And I think, look, they made a choice for those kids' lives that are going to harm those kids for the rest of their lives and possibly the next generation. So not only did they ruin their kid's life, but potentially the rest of that branch of that tree. And that's a bad thing in my view. I'd love to hear your thoughts, though. You know somebody who does it well? Let me know. I'd love to hear the story. If you got a better one than the snake venom guy, I'd love to hear that too. Going to take a quick break. Right back with our good friend Bob Ney. Stick around and listen to The Rick Smith Show.
Waving the flag of freedom for people, not corporations. Rick Smith.
He has 17 executive orders, really wiping away much of what President Trump did.
President Biden moves to undo even more of Trump's attacks on the environment.
The federal government also owns an enormous fleet of vehicles.
And will use the power of the government purse to boost electric vehicles. Plus, court strikes fatal blow to Trump's polluting power plant rule.
All of those blows, fatal and otherwise, straight ahead. From BradBlog.com, I'm Brad Friedman.
And I'm Desi Doyen.
Stand by for 6 minutes of independent green news, politics, analysis, and snarky comment.
This back and forth, this must be so weird for other countries. Because under Obama, America celebrated the Paris Accords. But then under Trump, it was like, the Paris Accords! Let the planet burn! And then now under Biden, it's like, all right, guys, I'm back in the Paris Accords. Sorry, yeah, and I'm also back on my meds. Sorry about that.
Yeah, we are sorry. And back on our meds. This is your Green News Report. Okay, Desi Doyen, I don't know how long it's going to take to undo all that Donald Trump did to the environment in the last 4 years, but we're off to a good start.
Oh, definitely. The Biden administration is moving swiftly on that monumental task of undoing the damage the Trump administration inflicted on the environment, while also launching Biden's whole-of-government approach to combating man-made climate change. Here is a partial list. The Biden administration announced a temporary pause on all new oil, gas, and coal leasing for U.S. lands and waters. It does not affect existing leases, but is a first step to proposing a total ban on fossil fuel leases on the public's lands. The temporary suspension also applies to new mining approvals and land swaps, including that transfer of lands in Arizona that are held sacred by Native Americans to a mining company. That is now on hold.
Good.
Biden rescinded Trump's 2019 declaration of a national emergency at the southern border with Mexico, which halts further construction of Trump's border wall that has already damaged the fragile desert environment.
Good again.
Biden also reinstated the Obama-era federal flood standard, which mandates that the design and construction of federally funded infrastructure must account for future sea level rise, increased flood risks, and other accelerating climate impacts.
Good, good, and good.
Biden's Environmental Protection Agency has asked the Department of Justice to pause its defense of Trump-era environmental rollbacks in court. The EPA is relaunching staff trainings on environmental justice and environmental racism. On Monday, as part of his Buy America plan, Biden announced he will direct the formidable purchasing power of the federal government, about $600 billion a year in funding, to buy only American-made products and materials while investing in modernizing infrastructure and climate solutions. And that includes replacing the entire U.S. government's vehicle fleet.
The federal government also owns an enormous fleet of vehicles, which we're going to replace with clean electric vehicles made right here in America by American workers, creating millions of auto worker jobs in clean energy and vehicles that are net zero emissions. And together, this will be the largest mobilization of public investment in procurement, infrastructure, and R&D since World War II.
Wow, that's huge. That's a lot of cars if he's going to replace the entire fleet. How many are we talking about here?
We are talking about 650,000 vehicles. Biden will also close loopholes that had previously allowed car makers to claim their vehicles are American-made, even if only a few parts were made in the U.S.
So a lot of electric cars are going to be made by government fiat.
Yep. Biden is also hiring climate experts for top positions in every cabinet-level agency. He'll unveil a second round of climate-related executive orders later in the week. Meanwhile, very huge, very good news. A federal court has struck down one of Trump's most consequential climate rollbacks. The D.C. Circuit Court of Appeals vacated the Trump administration's replacement of President Obama's landmark Clean Power Plan, the first ever standards to reduce carbon emissions from power plants. The Trump replacement rule was so weak that the Trump administration admitted it would actually increase pollution and could cause as many as 1,400 additional premature deaths every year.
Of course, that's why he liked it.
The court said that the Trump administration, quote, fundamentally misconceived the law. And crucially, it also reaffirmed the EPA's authority to craft climate regulations for a range of sources. The ruling gives the Biden administration a clean slate to craft new rules to control greenhouse gas emissions from power plants and meet Biden's target of 100% clean electricity by 2035. Finally, auto industry experts say electric vehicles are close to the tipping point of rapid mass adoption thanks to the plummeting cost of batteries. German car maker Audi became the latest manufacturer to announce it is ending production of internal combustion versions of its most popular car models, including plug-in hybrids, and will focus instead on going full electric. No point planning to build a car that you aren't going to be able to sell.
I told you to get rid of those internal combustion cars long ago. For much more on all of these stories and the ones we couldn't get to today, check out our website at greennews.bradblog.com. Find, follow, and share us planet-wide on the Facebooks and the Twitters at Green News Report. I'm Brad Friedman.
And I'm Desi Doyen.
And this has been your Green News Report.
Welcome back to the Rick Smith Show. Now, here is Rick Smith.
So, another day of executive orders. Another day of undoing the damage of the last 4 years. And one of the big ones, evidently, the Biden administration is re-examining the sale of arms to Saudi Arabia and the UAE. And I got to tell you, you could have predicted this. It was something I don't think we should have been doing. I think it was a bad idea. But Trump was making the argument we're just selling stuff. Yeah. Anyway, here to share some thoughts on, well, this is a good idea, bad idea. His thoughts. I've asked our good friend Bob Ney to come back, to former Ohio congressman, one of my favorite political analysts. Bob, thanks for taking time for us.
Well, thank you, Rick.
So, re-examining the sale of the planes and the guns. Is that a good idea?
Well, I'm not going to give Biden an A. I'm going to give him an A+ on it, okay? This is a wonderful thing that he's done to re-examine the entire thing. And first of all, if you look at it, I mean, even a ton of Republicans didn't like the fact that President Trump, was going to do something. They made a statement on it. He did it anyway. He was very enthralled with Mohammed bin Salman. In fact, I would argue, Rick, at one point in time, after the Khashoggi murder, had the United States, through President Trump, not supported MBS, he may not have survived in the kingdom. He might have been forced to step, but we supported him totally with the Trump administration. Now, beyond that, the fact that he's not a good guy and we can't trust him, Mohammed bin Salman, Saudi Arabia, is trying to do everything he can do with the proxy war against Iran with the Yemenis. And on top of it, the more armed they are, the more chance that they're going to, try to do something. Why should we trust the Kingdom of Saudi Arabia?
No.
I've watched, Rick, for years, everybody kowtowing to Saudi Arabia. And, this is just a great thing. It sends a message to Riyadh, Saudi Arabia, immediately.
No, that's a good thing. But you'll hear, some on the right complain that by ending some of the free drilling on federal lands that Biden has done as part of his climate change plan, that we're more dependent on Saudi Arabia. So we need to cozy up with them.
Well, we're not dependent on Saudi Arabia. There's so many misnomers out here. First of all, we're only dependent when we allow ourselves to be dependent. We produce. The problem we have is we haven't built refineries since 1976. So, Saudi Arabia will refine and then, we purchase. But we have the ability to do this on our own. So we don't really need Saudi Arabia as much. We can turn to other, sources at one point in time. And we have to remember this. As Saudi Arabia constantly goes against Iran, not that Iran's a picnic in the park, but I've lived in Saudi Arabia, and ironically, I've lived in Iran. And let me tell you, the Kingdom of Saudi Arabia is tough, extremely tough. They also were the starting of Wahhabism. They backed the 911 element. They backed Al Qaeda. They backed ISIS. So they've not been the good guys, but they're always saying, well, you need to do something about Iran to the United States. When they themselves have been this, radical element. So they do that smokescreen all the time. So they're angry at Biden anyway, over the Iran nuclear deal. The reason I bring up Iran so much right now is if Iran comes into the fold, if Iran drops the centrifuges, the nuclear ambitions, and the oil goes into the market, guess who that hurts? Saudi Arabia. Saudi Arabia likes us cutting off Iran. That's the real problem.
Yeah, it keeps them fat and happy.
Sure, absolutely.
So why is that message not out there? Because look, I don't know anybody who's sane and reasonable who wants to start a war with Iran. In fact, I always go back to something a guy we had on multiple times over the years, Larry Korb from the Center for American Progress, said. He said, if you thought it was fun going into Iraq, just wait till you go into Iran. They actually have planes that fly and guns that shoot. So this idea that we're going to start a war with Iran, not a good idea. And I think most people agree, not a good idea. So why do we keep, doing things that pick at them?
Well, because, Iran, and again, I want to make it clear, it doesn't have a nice government, okay? No. The clerics, But as soon as you say something about Iran, well, why are you defending the clerics? No. Now, they had a reformist president, Rouhani, as they did before with Khatami. They had a reformist president, but there's elements that fight each other over there. But the fact remains, about Iran that it was being dealt with. But any time you go to do anything about even talking about Iran, this will happen to Biden too, you will have Saudi Arabia and you will have Netanyahu go wild because they don't want us communicating. They don't want it resolved. They want this other element out there because there's the bad guy, not Saudi Arabia. There's the bad guy, Iran. Well, there's a couple of bad guys over there.
No, there's a bunch of bad guys, Putin being one of them.
Right, whole neighborhood.
The whole neighborhood. And then Putin being one of them as well. Evidently, the president had his first phone call with Putin on Tuesday. They brought up the opposition leader who was poisoned. I guess they brought up, them putting bounties on the heads of American soldiers. Within his first week, he was tougher on Putin than Trump was over 4 years.
Right, and the other thing he did, which was very smart in this process with the call to Putin, he called NATO allies first. He called European allies first. Then he made the call to Putin. Now, some people may say, well, why did he call Putin? Well, it's Russia. It's there. There's China. It's there.
Yep.
Iran. It's there. You still make communication. At some point in time, we have to do that. So, but I think that he handled and broached some topics that needed to be talked about, including the opposition.
From what I've heard, I think Biden was pretty tough and held his ground. I think as he had to do. And you're right. He called. It was my view, not so much that he called everyone in NATO first, but you're probably right. That was a signal that they were more important. But it was and I guess I got Trump on the brain for so long, but it was because Putin was one of the last people in the world to congratulate him.
Well, we were talking about Biden at lunch today. I had a staffer that I had lunch with, a former staffer, and she was talking about how I sent her over to the Senate, and I sent her over to the Foreign Affairs Committee where Biden was at the time. And this was years back. And because we were doing some things with Biden's office, on some issues with the Mideast. And as Deb was saying today, and anybody that knows Biden, she said he, excels in foreign affairs. People think of Biden as, judiciary mainly, because, he was there and prominent, but he excels in foreign affairs. This is his specialty. This is where he's been known for years, and he will have a lot of ability to have a mastery of communication when it comes to foreign issues.
Well, let's hope so, because we got a lot of healing of relationships to do, because if we're going to take on China, if you're going to hold them to account, you're going to have the rest of the world to do it.
And he's on the right track on China.
Yeah, and I was going to ask you.
You and I talked about that a couple months ago, remember?
Yep. So what's he done so far at this point? I mean, where do you think he's been? What are the early indications in your view?
Well, he's done several things. First of all, they haven't ruled out listening to the big tech CEOs about how we revitalize, our own industry, and maybe not go to war with China on tech issues, but have our own, prominence and our own kind of food chain, when it comes to those issues. So he's done that. But on top of it, he has kept the tariffs. He didn't, eliminate the tariffs, and also he is challenging, some positions that they have, and he's talking about, trying to have some new approaches. but he's also mentioning publicly at this point in time China's economic abuses. He's talking about that. And also, one major difference from the Trump era rhetoric is Biden's strong emphasis on multilateralism. And he's also trying to bring other people into the fold on this, with the pressure involving China. So, I think that, one other thing I did want to mention, on January 23rd, they issued a statement reaffirming rock-solid support for Taiwan. So he's knowing how to, come out swinging at China as he needs to do it, letting them know that, we are taking certain positions, but if you want to talk to us, we'll be willing to, communicate. So I think he got tough on it. Look, people were worried about it because he had made a statement during the election that was not a good statement to make about, well, they're not the bad guys, and he doesn't have to come out and say they are the bad guys, but he's got to take some approaches, which he's doing on it. So
his actions, I think, have been good.
He's got
so
an open
far.
engagement policy.
No, I'm not unhappy at this moment. I wanted to get your thoughts on moving to the impeachment and the filibuster in the Senate and all that stuff on the Senate side. And I know you were in the House; that's where your expertise is. But you know about the Senate. Mitch McConnell today tweeted out, "Today I made clear that if Democrats ever attack the key Senate rules, it would drain the consent and comity out of the institution. A scorched earth Senate would hardly be able to function. It wouldn't be a progressive's dream. It would be a nightmare. I guarantee it." I take that as a threat.
Yeah, I would say so. That's a get tough that is going to obviously, I think, probably make Schumer have the get tough. As far as the impeachment, Rand Paul probably did a pretty smart thing. He forced a vote on the constitutionality of finishing the impeachment in the Senate on a president that isn't president anymore. And so he had a motion, 55 to 45. It was killed. 5 Republicans joined the Democrats, which probably shows about 5 there. But it's almost like they've got cover now. Well, we can't impeach him because it's really unconstitutional because he's not in there anymore. Of course, I do think, Rick, that the House shouldn't have given Pence 24 hours to invoke the 25th Amendment, first of all. And when the House passed the impeachment, they should have just thrown it over to the Senate one way or the other that day.
I'm with you.
This gives an escape valve. It really does. And then Rand Paul was pretty smart to throw it out there, the idea, well, this isn't constitutional. He's not there anymore. What are we doing? So I think that it was an error to not move that immediately.
But what do you say to the argument? Because I had a guest earlier who said, no, we shouldn't. We're doing the right thing. We're going down the right path. We need to stretch this out because, you're going to see more of these horrific crimes. You're going to see more video. You're going to see, all of this stuff, played out. And we're going to learn more about what Trump's campaign may have done. We found out that, their campaign paid $2.7 million to the organizers. We're going to find all of these connections, the smoking gun kind of, I guess, theory that we're going to find that smoking gun. What do you say to that argument?
Well, yeah, here's the problem with it at this point in time. Number one, let's do a hypothetical here that the campaign manager, they got an email, and the campaign manager said, stir them up, get them hot to the point where they're out of control. Let's say hypothetically that happened, all right? They have to now then link that to approval and knowledge of Trump. They would have to go back, basically, and amend the impeachment. They would have to go through the process of proving that. Do they want to take 100 days to do that? Do they want to take 5 months to do it? Do you want to do it in 6 months? It's not there. And the longer this goes, I'm not sure that the silver bullet, if it's out there, will be able to be factually checked out. And that's, I think, part of the problem. And I think there are going to be Democrats who are going to say, do you want to extend this for 5-6 more months? I bet you that President Biden doesn't. Now, I think getting at something is something they should do. You and I have talked about this. They should go back and find out who lied to us about the Iraq War and put him in jail. There's things that should be done that weren't done. But in this case, the problem is the mechanism and the mechanics, and it should have been done, a couple of weeks ago. And then you've got fresh at the scene, you've got a sitting president, and there was a lot of things they would have had to have automatically defended.
Yeah, I mean, it's
tough now.
It's tough
at this
now.
point in time.
And look, I knew from the beginning that you weren't going to get Republicans to come over, and the further away from we get, as you've said, the heat of it, the more cover they're going to get, and the more the base is going to recover, and they're going to not care, because already the frame is he's gone, so what? It's over. This seems now punitive. And, and I got to be honest, I want accountability. I want some justice there.
Sure.
Finally, Bernie Sanders basically stole the inauguration show, which I love because I love Bernie. Actually raised some money for the for Vermont organizations over the mittens.
Over the mittens, right? I think that is absolutely, because Bernie shows up with an envelope, and as I told somebody, Bernie walked in my office one day with the greatest idea for a bill, and he sat down and he had this armful of papers, Rick. I mean, probably a half a foot tall, and I said to him, I think at the time it was something like, Bernie, you actually read this stuff, and he kind of snickered, but that's Bernie Sanders. I mean, he doesn't do this intentionally. He's just Bernie.
Yep.
And there he carried something out there with him, some kind of envelope or something, and he had the mittens on, and he has become an amazing emoji all over the world. Bernie is Bernie.
Yeah, I mean, I tell people he's probably the only guy in the Senate who carries a paper bag lunch to work every day.
And Rick, after he said, here's my idea to help seniors, and I said, Bernie, that's amazing. Put me on the bill. And he looked at me and he goes, I'm not an idiot. I want you to author the bill. You guys control the chamber. I just want to pass it. Yeah, pretty cool,
No, and that's why I love Bernie, and that's why in 2016 I wanted to see him win more than anything.
Right.
Although I got to be honest, and I've said it before, he wouldn't have won this time around.
But I think in 2016, I believe he was different because Hillary was just absolutely going down the tubes in Pennsylvania and Wisconsin, all over her trade position. Bernie was the same as Trump in trade.
Yep.
He would have won Pennsylvania.
Yeah,
that's what I argue.
I know I said last question, but Ohio, you the Ohio guy, Portman gone. Thoughts?
Well, everybody's talking about Jim Jordan, which would be a horrific mistake for the Republicans. The lieutenant governor today said, well, he's not going to do it. So I don't know who's going to be out there yet to do it. But Jim Jordan may want it, although I would say, he'll probably assess. He's got some problems, so I think he'll probably assess and see that he could get a little bit more power in the House. But it'll be an interesting primary. Ohio could be up for grabs. This isn't one that they should take lightly.
Yeah, I had the former head of the Democratic Party there in Ohio on last night, David Pepper, and he was he was saying that don't wish for Jim Jordan because you might get him. Because the Republicans will probably vote for him. I know a lot of people seem to be throwing this Amy Acton's name around. It'll be interesting to see how she plays.
It would be. Her name was out there today. I don't think in the end that Jordan will run. But as people say, I agree with what the former chairman said. As people say, Jordan, don't be so sure that would be somebody that wouldn't be a real tough opponent.
Yeah, and I don't want it. I don't want him in the Senate. No. That'd be horrible. Anyway, Bob, I appreciate the time as always. Fantastic stuff.
Thank you, Rick. Thank you.
Good stuff. Our good friend Bob Ney. Like I said, I definitely do not want Jim Jordan anywhere near the Senate, and I hope the people of Ohio wake up and realize he shouldn't be in the House either, especially after all of this craziness. It's just he's one of the people who have riled people up and still refuses to admit that Trump won. At least from what I've been able to see, I haven't seen him say, "Oh, I was wrong." I haven't seen it yet. And that's a problem. Anyway, mark your calendars. Saturday night, I got to throw this out there. Saturday night, 7 p.m., we're going to have another installation of Trivia Night. This week we're going to be talking about infrastructure. Pennsylvania Lieutenant Governor John Fetterman's going to be at the show, say a couple of words. Also, we're going to have Jennifer Clymer, the director of the movie Be Prepared to Stop. She's going to share some thoughts as well. It's going to be a great time. We'll get links out on social media on how you can sign up for that. Thanks so much for being here. If you missed any of the program, download the podcast at the website, get the app, do all that stuff. We'll see you back here next time.
You've been listening to The Rick Smith Show. Email Rick at rick@thericksmithshow.com. Until next time, this has been The Rick Smith Show, where working people come to talk.